Hey guys, EP Reads here. First of all, thank you so much for clicking on today's video. I greatly appreciate it. Okay, so before we jump into it, I just want to tell you guys how this video works as always. The first thing we're going to talk about, the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be a quick sort of overview of my experience reading this book. The second thing that we're going to talk about is a brief overview of what's inside the book. Next, we're going to talk about 3 of my favorite lessons that the book gives us. After that, we're going to talk about biggest takeaways from this book, kind of commitments and things that I'm going to be working on. Next, we're going to do my favorite quote from this book, and it's a good one. And lastly, we're going to talk about the reading experience and who I suggest this for. Crucial Conversations was actually given to me on the first day that I started my job. At first I was a little bit weary because it just sort of felt like another training, something that we had to do, had to check off. I wasn't super excited to start the book when I first got it, but boy, I'm glad that I did. Crucial Conversations was amazing for me. I feel like I learned so much, my eyes were open to so many different things. At first I thought it was just going to be sort of how to not say dumb things. Basically, how to structure your conversations and sentences to get things done. And so I felt that I was pretty good at that, pretty decent already. So I wasn't really excited, but it's so much more than that. It talks about how we should interact with others in our daily lives, how we should go about thinking things through, and how we should structure our conversations, especially when they get crucial. And what that means, it's when the stakes are high, emotions run strong, opinions vary. So really an example of a crucial conversation is anything from your spouse talking to you about important and sensitive marital things. It could be your boss confronting you about different project timelines, things like that. Really anything that meets those 3 things could be considered a crucial conversation. And it's something that I didn't realize is that this book really affects and applies to my life. 20 times in one day, I see myself having these crucial conversations multiple times. I would venture to say that about 95% of people will have something to take from this book. It's just that good and it applies to such a huge range of different things. Like I said, it could be anything from a spouse to a parent talking to a child, really in our everyday life. Such a fantastic experience. And I would seriously suggest it for absolutely everyone. This book is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The first thing that it does is it outlines what a crucial conversation is. And then one of my very favorite chapters was actually chapter 1. It really outlined how important these conversations are. It had some crazy statistics about how people that are able to execute crucial conversations are just that much more productive, and they get that much more done, and they save that much more time and money when they're doing things just because they're able to execute properly the crucial conversations. Not only does it talk about what and how these crucial conversations, why these crucial conversations are important to us, the next thing it does is it talks about how to recognize what a crucial conversation is and to realize that you're having these all the time. That was definitely an eye-opener for me. What this book does is it breaks down exactly the path of a crucial conversation. How we hear and internalize what's going on around us. We then tell ourselves a story basically about the things that we hear and we internalize, the facts that we see. We then feel about that story and then act, whether that's good or whether that's bad. This part of the book breaks it down exactly what happens during that process and how we can really choose what to do during that process. We don't have to tell ourselves a lie. We don't have to make up stories about our coworkers and things like that. It helps us to slow down and really take hold of our emotions and then execute. One of my favorite parts about it is it talks about the pool of meaning. When 2 people are trying to get something done and the conversation starts, they both start adding to the pool of meaning. Now, if one person shuts them down and says, hey, that wasn't smart, that's not a good idea, something like that, then the pool of meaning basically stops because the other person will either turn to violence or silence. One of my favorite parts about this book. Silence meaning they just stop adding to the pool of meaning, and violence meaning that they turn to different things like sarcasm or snarky remarks, things like that, that don't actually add to the pool of meaning. It goes through these different steps, basically how we hear things, then how we should think about those things that we hear, and then how we should respond. And it goes into very specific detail about each one of these steps with examples to back it up. And that's why I love this book, and I think it's going to be applicable to anybody that reads it. The first of my 3 favorite lessons from this book would have to be focus on what you really want. It's really easy when you're in conversation with someone and they say something that you don't like to either turn to silence or violence, like I talked about a little bit earlier. However, when you focus on what you really want, you realize that doing those things and maybe saying those things or not saying something isn't actually going to accomplish what you want. Great example in this book about a young executive who was trying to implement spending cuts to her team. And so she asked each one of them to basically cut back on discretionary things like that. And in that meeting, one of them reached out to her with kind of a snarky remark in front of everyone and says, "What about that new building that you're building?" So she had to decide whether to respond with a snarky remark in return or to focus on what she really wanted, which was to cut the budget. And so what she did is she kind of internalized that, took hold of her emotions, and then responded with a, "You know what, you're right, let's talk about this. Is this discretionary? Do we need this building? Is it something?" And so she was able to focus on what she really wanted, and by doing so, she accomplished her goal in her crucial conversation. My second lesson would have to be, don't let your emotions dictate your actions. 7 years ago, when I was a wee lad, just kidding, I'm not that old. My dad, when I was growing up, would always say, "You can't be annoying, you can only be annoyed." That took me so long to actually learn what that meant. I love the way that this book lays it out. Other people don't choose your emotions, and they don't make you feel those certain ways. You choose to be annoyed. You choose to be angry, and so no matter what someone does, it's still your choice. Now, you may naturally feel that emotion, but it's still your choice to feed that emotion or to cancel it out and kind of take a different path and go a different way. I think if we all learned that we have the choice over our emotions, that this world would honestly be a better place. Third lesson that I want to talk about is realize when you're telling yourself a story and getting away from the facts. That we see something or we hear something, and those are considered facts. My boss told me to do this task. That is a fact. And then we start to tell ourselves stories about those things. My boss told me to do this thing because he thinks I'm incompetent. That part is a story and not the fact. I think it's very easy to get away from the facts and start telling yourself stories. If we can get away from telling ourselves these stories and just focus on the facts, that helps us to execute and be efficient in our crucial conversations. There are 2 things that I want to focus on from this book. The first one is that I am just so humble that I need to work on being less humble. I'm absolutely joking. So the first thing I want to work on is I want to be a little bit more humble. I typically am very logical. I think through my opinions, my thoughts, my ideas, and I do a lot of research. And so whenever I say something or present something, it's typically because it's backed up by quite a bit of work. I don't like when people tell me that I'm wrong, and it's very natural for me to kind of shut down and go into either silence or violence. So the first thing I want to do is really work on being more humble and realizing that sometimes other people are just trying to add to the pool of meaning, and they may be right and I may be wrong. Definitely something that I want to work on. The second thing that I want to work on is getting away from telling myself stories and just focusing on the facts. As I do those 2 things, really stay humble and get away from those stories and just focus on the facts, I think I'm going to be able to execute my crucial conversations quite a bit better. Keep me accountable, YouTube. Let's be honest. Family and friends when you see me in person, because I know you're the only ones watching this. Thanks, Mom. Emotions don't settle on you like a fog. They are not hoisted upon you by others. No matter how uncomfortable it might make you feel saying it, others don't make you mad. You make you mad. You make you scared, annoyed, or insulted. You and only you can create your emotions. Crucial Conversations was a very easy read. I think it's about 220 pages if you read everything. The vocabulary is not too difficult. The sentence structure, things like that, it's very easy to get through. I believe I read it in a week and a half, something like that, and it wasn't one that I had to force myself to come back to. It really reminded me of a novel where I was interested in it. I was ready to flip the page. I was wanting to see what's coming next. And I think that we will all feel that way when we're reading it because you very quickly see that you have so much room to improve. The people that I would suggest reading this, absolutely any leader of any kind. 100%, this is a must. Any sort of professional, I think that this book would be immensely useful and helpful to any situation. Anyone who finds their emotions taking over their decision-making process. People who naturally have a timid, shy, or introverted personality. Dogs who struggle having effective communication with the neighborhood cats. Anyone who wants to improve their communication skills in any aspect. 100% my favorite book about communication that I've read so far.